Let's bring in Michael Graham and Molly Hooper. Michael is in Boston. He's a CBSN political contributor and columnist for the Boston Herald. Molly is in Washington. She covers Congress for The Hill, and I'm happy to say she is a newly minted CBSN political contributor. Yay, Molly. Yay, us. Once again, so much to get to.
Thanks. Congratulations to all of us.
Yes. Let's first of all start off with Steve Bannon's remarks there. Let me ask you, Michael, what did you hear?
I heard, blame the messenger for a horrific, awful message. And, the Judge Roy Moore story would be disturbing at any time. But with the backdrop of the Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey stuff, it resonates even more strongly. So you go after the messenger. And the message that a lot of Republicans who were not fans of Trump are trying to get out in the last 4 or 5 hours has been, guys, do not waste your ammo trying to defend Judge Moore. He's not worth it.
Yeah, Molly, what did you hear in Steve Bannon's remarks? And tell us what you're hearing in response to this Washington Post story.
Well, the first thing is that exactly it was sort of Steve Bannon blaming the messenger, but keep in mind he didn't necessarily defend Roy Moore, which was kind of interesting because these allegations are coming out now. You have the state party vice chair down in Alabama saying, well, it's suspicious that this woman comes out 40 years after she's been silent. But if you go to Michael's point, all of the revelations of Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey, it's sort of one of these moments where people are feeling a little bit more okay about speaking out regarding a subject that's so intimate and so difficult to discuss, it's more empowering. But what I'm hearing on Capitol Hill is you look at somebody like Lisa Murkowski, the Alaska senator, who actually won her most recent Senate bid as a write-in candidate. Well, pardon me, excuse me, it was in 2010 that she won as a write-in candidate after she lost the primary to a Sarah Palin-backed candidate, Joe Miller, who was the non-establishment candidate. But Lisa Murkowski was able to win in a write-in bid. So I understand that she's talked to Luther Strange, the current senator serving Sessions, I should say Sessions session, but who lost that initial primary.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting point because, Michael, you've got these Senate Republicans now still trying to do the math here and figure out, is there a way that something can perhaps still be salvaged here from this situation?
Right. And, there's the math of the 52 Republican senators, but the math is bigger than this. I mean, the fact is, because of the moment we're in, this story is radioactive. So you have that problem. Then you have the problem that you can't put someone else on the ballot. And trying to do a write-in is difficult under the best of circumstances. There's some talk about if he wins and then the Senate simply refuses to seat him, and then the Republican governor kicks in, that system kicks in, and then you have another vote. It's ugly either way. And even if Judge Roy Moore did step down, you really haven't solved that problem other than trying to go to a write-in. So this is terrible timing for the Republicans, and it also is giving some ammo to the people who've said about the Trump movement, the party suffers broadly when you have problems like this. Judge Roy Moore is a walking attack ad for Democrats, regardless of what happens in the next month.
Exactly. And keep in mind, Donald Trump did not endorse Roy Moore originally. He endorsed Luther Strange in this race. So, this really sort of pits this Steve Bannon type wing, who's seen as behind the Trump movement, so to speak, against the more establishment Republicans like Mitch McConnell, who backed Luther Strange, along with Donald Trump to a certain extent. And it's interesting to hear senators like John Cornyn, who's the #2 Senate Republican, say that if these allegations are proved to be true, he would reconsider his own endorsement of Roy Moore. But my question is, how do you prove that these allegations are true? And that's when you hear people like Cory Gardner say, oh, well, if they're proved to be true, I'm like, listen, regardless of what you think about the motives of Jeff Bezos, if you read that article in the Washington Post, I mean, it sounds, voluminous information.
Yeah, they talked to 30 people, conducted 30 interviews to report out this piece. piece. I mean,
Exactly.
What do you make of that qualifier, Molly?
That's why it's so unusual that they're using, that qualifier, because believe me, if the Republicans establishment folks like the Mitch McConnell group knew that this was out there to begin with, they would have used that in the primary. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. That sounds terrible.
Absolutely.
But
it's true.
It would have come out earlier. And again, from friends of mine that I've talked to who have been victims of sexual abuse or who have talked about this, it's not something they want to share with people. They don't even like sharing it with me. And so to come out and actually speak about it has been very difficult for a lot of folks. But with more people coming out and saying, the Me Too effort, it emboldens victims. And so that's kind of, to me, why it sort of explains the timing a little bit, because this more Me Too effort really has picked up steam.
Michael, I wonder, is anybody in any conservative circle that you're hearing about calling this fake news?
I know that Sean Hannity was trying to defend it by talking about consent, et cetera. Well, by definition, people who are underage can't consent. It's just that there is no way to get around this. Look, I'm from the South, okay? Things a little different than South. I have a grandmother who was married when she was 15 years old.
The age of consent in Alabama is 16.
Yes, but my point is that there are some, you could say, well, what about cultural, the cultural different? This is not from the 1920s or 30s. This was the 1970s and 80s, and that's just not going to fly. And I think that's why you have senators, Republican senators, coming straight out and saying something, as Molly pointed out, about if this is true, he's got to go. Not it's disturbing or it's problematic, but he has to go. That's a different, you don't usually hear that kind of talk in situations like this.
But why the qualifier, you think, Michael?
Well, because it is 40 years ago. I don't know if they've read the article. If anyone hasn't, I urge you to read it. It adds so much more depth of knowledge. If you're a person out there and you just see in your Twitter feed, 40 years later, somebody says he was bad, and that's all you have, well, okay, I get it. Read the story. There's a lot more meat on the bone.
Right.
And that was one interesting point that Rob Portman, a current Republican senator from Ohio, said. He's like, listen, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but it's really unusual that somebody would go on the record and discuss all these things. It's easier to say, if this is allegedly true, when it's somebody who's on background. But this is a woman who came forward, and her friends who were told at the time about this 40 years ago, they recall it, confirming this girl's story. I mean, it's just, it was really eye-opening. And again, the problem with Roy Moore is that he's taken these positions on social issues and, has come out with sort of anti-gay statements and sentiments and taken really hard-line conservative positions on social issues that, juxtaposing it with these allegations, it's something that that the Republicans just don't want to be dealing with right now. They want to be talking about tax reform.
Right, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about Judge Moore in the days to come. But let's talk about tax reform. We talked about that Thursday was tax rollout day for Senate Republicans, but how does that bill look different, Molly, than the House version?
Well, the Senate version, as President Trump has reportedly have said, one that more moderate Democrats would be in favor of, basically does not have this SALT deduction. So the state and local taxes, people can still deduct that from their overall tax bill. Also, the estate tax, not in there. I mean, they don't repeal the estate tax. The corporate rates to 20%. That's the same. However, it won't kick in until a year later. And so what's interesting is I was talking to House Republicans yesterday when they were sort of hearing drips and drabs of what would be in the Senate bill. They said, well, once we pass our bill, Speaker Ryan is definitely going to push for us to go to conference on this measure because they believe that will be so different from the Senate version that is actually able to pass out of the Senate.
Yeah, Michael, how significant are the gaps that Molly just laid out between the two versions of the tax reform bills?
Well, one thing is, my understanding is that the Senate version actually does make state and local taxes no longer deductible, that it takes away that deduction. So maybe I'm a little unclear on some of the facts. But it doesn't, I agree with the concept that this is all about getting a conference. get into the conference committee, they go in, they hash something out, and then they come out with what Trump supporters love to talk about, that binary choice. Either you're going to vote for some kind of tax cut thing or you're going to reject it. And I've talked to people, particularly people who are pro-Trump in D.C., who are frustrated that the members of Congress aren't making more trouble for Democrats in red states and letting them know, hey, there's going to come a time where you either have to reject a tax cut or vote for a tax cut. And right now, Democrats are a solid wall of, just say no. But the thinking is that once that binary choice comes out of conference, that they may peel some people off.
Exactly. Even Gary Cohn today was saying that he wanted to get something like 70 to 80 senators backing this measure. And Gary Cohn, Mark Short, they've met with Senate Democrats from these red states earlier this week, and they were in listening and receiving mode, according to one of the Senate Democrats who was there. And so they really do want to attract some Democratic support for this because, this would be a major deal for the tax code, and it's something that the president definitely wants bipartisan support on.
All right. Michael Graham and Molly Hooper, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.